Someone retired at 34 on a salary most people would call unremarkable. Not a tech windfall, not an inheritance. Not a side business that quietly became a main business. An average salary, work for 12 years, structured in a specific way that most of his colleagues never thought to replicate. When I first came across this story, I had the same reaction most people have. There must be something missing, some variable that explains it away. Then I looked at the exact strategy, step by step, and the thing that unsettled me was not how complex it was. It was how transferable it was. The number that stopped me, his peak annual income, adjusted for inflation, never exceeded $72,000. And there is a specific mechanism he used to convert that ordinary income into early retirement that almost nobody in his social circle understood was even possible. This video is that mechanism explained completely. I want to be honest about my reaction when I first studied this in detail. My initial instinct was to find the asterisk, the hidden advantage that made his outcome an outlier rather than a template. I spent time looking for it. What I found instead was a strategy built from decisions that are available to most people on a similar income, but that require a specific sequence, a specific mindset about the relationship between income and spending, and a specific structural understanding of how compounding behaves when you stop interrupting it. The discomfort I felt was not skepticism. It was recognition, because several of the decisions he made were ones I had access to at the same age and did not make. Not because they were beyond me, because nobody had laid out the logic clearly enough for me to see what they were actually worth. If this kind of financial clarity is what you come here for, subscribe and turn on notifications. There is more of this coming every week. Let me give you an analogy before I walk you through the strategy. Imagine two people building a stone wall. They have the same number of stones. They have the same amount of time. One places stones as they feel right, responding to the shape of the ground as it comes. The other studies the ground first, plans the base layer with precision, and makes sure every stone from that point forward is load-bearing and correctly positioned. By the end of the day, both walls are roughly the same height, but only one will stand in 5 years. The strategy behind retiring at 34 on an average salary is the second builder's approach. It is not about having more stones than everyone else. It is about placing them in a sequence where each one strengthens everything that comes after it. The foundation determines whether the whole structure eventually supports the weight of a life without a salary. Here is the data that frames everything this strategy is built on. Watch this bar build on screen from zero. His starting salary at 22 was $51,000 per year net of tax. It grew over 12 years to a peak of approximately $68,000 net. Over that period, his cumulative earned income totaled roughly $710,000. His portfolio at retirement, just over $920,000. He accumulated more in invested assets than he earned in total salary across 12 years. That is not a rounding error. That is what compounding does when you feed it consistently and do not withdraw from it during accumulation. The research behind this pattern, tracking moderate income households with high savings rates over 10 to 15-year windows, consistently shows that portfolio value can exceed cumulative earned income within 12 to 15 years at savings rates above 45% with consistent market participation. The mechanism that made this possible has two components. The first is structural, the second is behavioral. And the behavioral one is the part most people never fully account for in their planning. That is where we go next. The first component of his strategy was what he called his cost of life budget. Not a monthly spending plan, a deliberate, annually reviewed decision about what his life would cost in total, and a commitment that his spending would not expand simply because his income did. Let me describe what this looked like in practice. At 22, his total annual spending was $28,000. By 34, after 12 years of modest income growth, his total annual spending was $31,000, an increase of $3,000 across 12 years. Not because he lived in deprivation, because he made a series of conscious decisions not to upgrade his life in ways that would close the gap between income and spending. He did not own a new car at any point in the 12 years. He rented modestly and resisted the social pull toward a nicer apartment each time his income rose. He cooked. He traveled occasionally, but cheaply. He did not treat every raise as permission to spend more. Lifestyle anchoring, the documented tendency for spending to rise automatically with income, unless deliberately constrained, is the single mechanism that derails more moderate income accumulation plans than any other. He understood this and built his entire strategy around not letting it happen. Watch this gap on screen between his income line and his spending line. That gap, held open deliberately for 12 years, is where $920,000 came from. If you are finding this useful, take 2 seconds and hit like. Walking through the exact strategy behind retiring at 34 on an average salary is the kind of detailed breakdown this channel exists to deliver. I appreciate everyone. Stay with me, because this next part is where the full picture finally clicks. The second component of his strategy is the one that converted the gap between his income and spending into $920,000 rather than simply a large savings account, earning very little. And it is where most people who successfully hold their spending still leave significant value on the table. He described his approach to investing as deliberately boring. Every dollar of surplus went into the same place. Low cost, broadly diversified index funds inside every tax-advantaged account available to him, maxed out in priority order before a single dollar went anywhere else. No individual stocks, no cryptocurrency positions, no real estate side ventures. The rationale he gave was precise. Every hour spent researching individual investments is an hour not spent on his actual life, and the data on active stock selection by individual investors does not support the effort. Research consistently shows that over 15-year periods, the majority of actively managed portfolios and individual stock selections underperform a simple low-cost index approach after fees and taxes. He understood this not as a compromise, but as the structurally correct decision. His investment cost across 12 years averaged approximately 0.1% annually. At his portfolio size, the difference between 0.1% and 1.5% in annual fees, which is not an unusual fee for actively managed products, represents approximately $45,000 to $60,000 in compounded value by retirement. He chose the boring option. The boring option built significantly more wealth. There is a quiet irony in that, and I found it genuinely satisfying. Now, let me show you the complete numerical picture. Age 22, net income $51,000, annual spending $28,000, annual surplus $23,000, savings rate 45%. Year 1 portfolio contribution, approximately $1,900 per month. By age 27, year 5. The portfolio sits at approximately $145,000, with income having grown modestly and the surplus widening slightly. Watch this line accelerate on screen as the compounding begins to contribute meaningfully alongside new contributions. By age 30, year 8, the portfolio reaches approximately $380,000. The compounding is now contributing roughly as much annual growth as his new contributions are adding. By age 32, year 10, approximately $560,000. By age 34, year 12, $920,000. His annual spending of $31,000 represents a withdrawal rate of approximately 3.4% on his final portfolio, within the historically supportable range for a 60-year retirement horizon. Every number in this picture is built from 2 decisions: holding the spending gap open and putting the surplus in the structurally correct place without interrupting it. Here are the 3 elements of his strategy I want you to carry from this. First, define your cost of life as a deliberate annual decision, not a passive default. The most powerful financial decision he made was not a stock pick or a market timing call. It was choosing not to let his spending expand each time his income did. That decision, held for 12 years, is worth several $100,000 in final portfolio value. Second, treat your savings rate as the primary metric of your financial health, not your account balance. He did not track his portfolio obsessively. He tracked whether his savings rate was holding above 45% each year. The balance took care of itself. Third, invest in the lowest cost, most broadly diversified structure available to you, inside tax-advantaged accounts first, and do not change the strategy when markets move. The boring consistency was not incidental to his outcome. It was the strategy. Here's what I want to leave you with. The question this video started with was whether retiring at 34 on an average salary is a genuine template or an outlier with hidden advantages. The answer, after examining the exact strategy in detail, is that it is a template. Not an easy one. Not one that requires zero sacrifice, but one built entirely from decisions available to most people on a similar income. The cost of life discipline. The gap held open across 12 years of modest income growth. The surplus directed into low-cost compounding vehicles without interruption. 920,000 from 710,000 in cumulative earnings. The strategy is not secret. It is specific. And now you know exactly what it looks like. Retiring at 34 on an average salary is not the story of an exceptional income. It is the story of an ordinary income held inside an exceptional structure for just long enough that the compounding did what compounding always does when you stop getting in its way.